All right, so this is a fair game review. So we're going to be recording this lesson as we go. So this is the beginning of chapter 3. So we are going to use our books. You'll need your books tomorrow. The big blue book. So half of you guys, most of you guys have it up here. So it has your name in there.
The one with the plan?
The hardback book. The hardback book. Okay, listen. Listen. Okay, so today we're going to learn some new stuff, and it's talking about angles and their relationships. So today on this side, we're going to look at adjacent and vertical angles. Okay, there's something to do with congruency that we'll talk about. So we have a couple interesting things. I will need you to have your notebooks out. So go ahead and take out your notebooks right now. Yes, you're going to write some information down. Okay, so we're going to talk about the definition of adjacent and vertical. Okay? So in your notebooks, these are definitions that I need you guys to write down. I'm going to work over to the side here on mine. So adjacent. Okay, so the definition of adjacent means next or next to. Okay, so they're usually touching. It's like your neighbor. Okay, so Mrs. McKay's room is adjacent to mine. Mr. Murillo's is adjacent to my room. Mr. Morton's is not adjacent to mine. It is not next door. It's not touching. We don't share a common wall. Okay? So that's not adjacent. So next to or touching is adjacent. Okay, so the next one is vertical. When we're talking about vertical angles, I'm going to talk about angles that are across the X, across this. Okay, so across the X. Yes. Okay. So if you look, okay, so across the X, okay, so I'm going to do a big X. So A and B are vertical. Okay, so A is vertical to B. If I call this C and D, C is vertical to C. Can you guys see that? Like I need to add some light. There we go. Okay? So those are very, very important information that we need to know. Okay? D. Okay? Got that written down, Andrew? I'm still going to wait for you to write this down. Okay, so supplementary angles are two adjacent angles that create a straight line. Here's my straight line. Here's my two adjacent angles that equal 180 degrees. Angle A is adjacent to angle B. They are supplementary. Got that? Somebody said no, we're not ready for the next definition. Should I give you guys more time? All right. So the next thing we want to write is we want to talk about complementary angles. And I don't mean that these angles are going to pay you compliments. Okay? We're talking about complementary. They're not going to tell you you look nice every day. They're not going to tell you how good your hair looks. Okay? Thank you, Miss Maciel. You're not a complementary angle, though. Okay, So complementary angles, listen carefully, are two angles, two, again, adjacent angles. That means they're touching, whose sum, that means when you add them up, is 90 degrees. Okay, so you see this little box here? That represents a right angle, which is 90 degrees. And these angles here, which are touching, are complementary. You're writing this down here. So I'm going to show you here with an example. Angle A and angle B. Okay, so we're going to say angle A, that's an angle, is complementary, I'm going to abbreviate, to angle B. Angle A is complementary to angle B. And what they do is they form a right angle, which is represented by this square. So we know whenever we have an angle that has this square, it's going to be a 90-degree angle, and any angle that's created is going to equal 90 degrees. Go ahead and copy that down. Let me know when you're ready, Sharon. All right, one more definition I need you guys to write, and this is super important, okay? So if you remember, we called these vertical angles, right? So vertical angles, can you see it? There, vertical angles are congruent. We represent congruency in math by an equal sign with a squiggly on top. Okay, so this means congruent. Congruent means the same. Okay, make sure you get that written down, and then I'll bring all of this wonderful information together. Okay, so let's bring all this together. Okay, so this is some really good stuff here. This is like very foundational to what we're going to be doing. We're going to be explaining the relationship of angles, and we're going to look at adjacent, vertical, and complementary, supplementary. Okay, so if we look at number 1, what kind of angles would these be? Now, you only have the choice of adjacent or vertical. What are they? They're adjacent. That means they're touching, right? Right next door to each other? Are they right next to each other, Greg? Or are they not right next to each other? So Camilo says that they're vertical. That means they go across the X. Did they go across the X? Look at my example. Are they right next to each other like C and B and D? Or are they across the X like A and B, Kevin? Kevin? They're across. So what are they, vertical or adjacent? So we're going to say that these are vertical. But look at my directions. It says tell whether the angles are adjacent or vertical. And then it says find the value of X. Right? So, Jordan, you're telling me that angle X is going to equal 128. Can you tell me why it's going to equal 128?
I mean, vertical angles are
congruent. And what do we know about congruent angles? They're the same. All right, so I'm going to review here what Jordan told me. Jordan told me that these angles, or actually Kevin told me that they're vertical. Okay, so in order to find the value of X, Jordan told me it was 128. He told me it was 128 because they're vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. Congruent means that they measure the same. So based on this information that I've just given you, these angles are vertical, and X is equal to 128. Does that make sense? Okay, you guys go ahead and do 1, and, oh no, 3. 3 is a little tricky. We'll do that later. We'll do that next. Okay, so let's look at 3. First, we're going to identify, are they vertical or adjacent? Raise your hand if you have an answer. Greg, are they vertical or adjacent? They're right next to each other, B and D, C and B.
They're vertical.
Jordan says they're vertical. Greg, do you agree? I need you to know. They're not vertical. They don't go across the X. They do. So are they vertical or adjacent? They are vertical. Okay, so what do I know about vertical angles? They're the same. Okay, so if they're the same, in order for me to find this answer, okay, so we're going to say that they are vertical. I need to solve this problem. So I'm going to write 2x plus 1 is equal to 75. Okay. Since 2x plus 1 is equal to 75, I can solve for x. But I'm not going to ask you to solve for x today on this one. Okay, I just want you to tell me if it's vertical or not. All right, so let's look at number 2. All right, so let's look at angle. Look at number 2. What kind of angles are these going to be? Does it create a straight line or a right angle? So are they supplementary or complementary? These are going to be complementary. Okay, so does that mean that we talked about complementary angles are 2 adjacent angles, right? So are these angles going to be vertical or adjacent? They're going to be adjacent. I want you to cross off where it says find the value of x because I don't want you to do these on the adjacent or angles. It's adjacent. Complementary, but it's adjacent. Okay? Not for these, not yet. So let's look at number 4. Again, are these going to be vertical angles or adjacent angles?
Adjacent angle.
These are adjacent. Good. I don't want you to try and find the measure yet. Okay? Cross off number 5. We're not doing number 5. All right. Flip it over to the back side. Cross off number 10. I'm not going to ask you to find the value of x, but I do want you to tell me if they're adjacent, vertical, complementary, supplementary. Okay?